Pledge of Allegiance, read by Ms. Pollier.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much. Clerk, please call the roll.
Greenberg.
Here.
Hicks is absent. Mako.
Here.
Shapaka.
Here.
Suriano.
Here.
Tamarkin.
Here.
Pollier.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, any additions or corrections to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from May 22nd, 2024?
So moved. Tamarkin.
We have a motion by Mr. Tamarkin. Do we have a second?
Second, Greenberg.
Second by Mr. Greenberg. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Tamarkin.
Yes.
Greenberg.
Yes.
Mako.
Absent or abstain?
Shapaka.
Yes.
Suriano.
Yes.
Pollier.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Next, we'll begin the swearing in of applicants and speakers. I'll recognize the city attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are now at the public hearing portion of the meeting. The public hearing will operate as follows. Administrative staff will make a presentation or comment on the application. The applicant or their representative may then make a presentation or comment on the application. The applicant has 10 minutes to present, and additional time may be requested. Permission is at the discretion of the chair. Public comment will then be open for 3 minutes allowed per speaker. Additional time may be requested. Permission is at the discretion of the chair. Speakers must complete a speaker slip and come to the podium and state their name and address. The applicant will then be given 10 minutes to comment. Additional time may be requested. Permission is at the discretion of the chair. If there is more than one application pending for a particular address, the presentation on each application may be consolidated and presented as one. At this time, will persons wishing to present testimony this evening please rise and raise your right hand to be sworn in. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, state I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. We'll now begin the applications and public comment. Read the first item into the record. We have a variance case, V-0010-2024, to consider a variance application to vary section 1143.09 off-street parking of the codified ordinances of the city of Gahanna for property located at 551 Cherry Road, parcel ID 025-001043, current zoning SF3. Andrew Lee applicant. Ms. Kapka, do you have a presentation?
The first application tonight is a variance at 551 Cherry Road. This application was filed under the previous zoning code, and the zoning district at that time was SF3. The site is approximately 1 acre, which is larger than the average single-family residential site in Gahanna, and the majority of the surrounding residential sites are also larger. The applicant is requesting approval of a variance to construct a garage larger than what code permits. The lot is currently undeveloped, and a building permit for a new house is in review. The maximum garage size allowed per code is 800 square feet, or 1/3 of total floor area, whichever is smaller. The proposed garage is 1,026 square feet and is attached to the house by a breezeway. The garage is also 143 feet from the front property line, so it is set back greatly from the road. Here is a site plan. This shows the portion of the site that is being developed. The new garage is shown in red. Since it is attached with a breezeway, it's considered an attached garage, so it's permitted to be to the front of the home, while a detached garage would be restricted just to the rear of the home. Here is an elevation of the west side of the house that shows what the garage will look like, and also shows the breezeway attaching the garage to the home. This is the specific variance that is being requested. It's for off-street parking requirements. Once again, code restricts garages to a maximum size of 800 square feet, and the proposed garage exceeds this by 226 square feet. This is the standard variance criteria that must be met in order for the variance to be granted. So special circumstances or conditions, preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights, and no detrimental effects. Staff recommends approval of the variance as submitted. The lot is very large, and the garage would be 143 feet from the front property line, which decreases visibility a bit. The applicant also states they need a larger garage for tools, vehicles, and a riding mower, and they don't intend to have any sheds on their lot. And the new zoning code does not have any restrictions on garage size, so the proposed garage is actually in line with the new zoning code and wouldn't require any variances. That is the conclusion of my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kopka. We'll now open public comment. Would the applicant like to comment? You could, if you could state your name, address,
Yes, I am Nate Little. I work for the company that designed the house, Professional Design Services, at 620 Alum Creek Road in Bexley. And I have no further comment, but I take any questions if you have them on the property.
All right, thank you. Anyone from the public? You don't believe any speaker slips? Seeing none, we'll now close public comment, and we'll open it up for questions for the commissions. Starting on my left, Mr. Chapaka?
No comments. Questions, Mr. Chair? Thank you.
Ms. Polly?
I don't have any questions or comments either.
Mr. Greenberg?
I have a question for Ms. Kapka. Was there any other departments have any concerns?
No.
Okay, thank you. No other comments.
Mr. Siriano?
No questions for me, thank you.
Mr. Shamarkin?
None for me.
Okay, and I also have no questions. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve V-0010-2024?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that variance V-0010-2024 for approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Do we have a second?
Second, Chapaka.
Thank you, Mr. Chapaka. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I'd say that everything kind of falls in line. It looks like, just because we don't have any questions, it was explained pretty thoroughly, and I will be in favor of the variance.
Ms. Polly?
I don't have any comments at this time.
Mr. Greenberg?
No comment.
Mr. Siriano?
I'll be in favor, given the order of magnitude is larger than what's permitted is not that much, and given the orientation and distance from the street. So.
Thank you. Mr. Markin?
No comment.
Okay, and I also have no comment. So clerk, please call the roll.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Chapaka,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes.
Suriano,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Pollyea.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is another variance case. It's V-0011-2024 to consider a variance application to vary sections 1145.06 and 1167.17B of the codified ordinances of the city of Gahanna for property located at 361 Canfield Drive, parcel ID 025-002414, current zoning R4. Christie Nye applicant. Ms. Kapka, do you have a presentation?
The second variance application of the night is at 361 Canfield Drive. This one was also filed under the previous zoning code, and it was zoned R4, which was a single-family residential district. The applicant is requesting approval of two variances to allow a shed to the side of a house and within a side yard setback. The zoning code requires that all accessory structures be located to the rear of the primary structure. The shed encroaches 3 feet into the 5-foot side yard setback, and it's also located within a 5-foot sanitary sewer easement. The shed was installed prior to city approval, and this application is due to code enforcement action. The shed was installed in the exact same location as an older shed that was in that spot for around 30 years. There's also no garage on the property, so a shed is the only way to store outdoor materials. Here is a site map of the property. The 5-foot setback and easement are shown in red, and the location of the shed is shown in yellow, so you can see how it encroaches into that 5-foot setback and easement. There is also another 5-foot easement on the neighboring property to the south along that same property line. The location of the manhole that the easement is for is shown in purple. The applicant states that the manhole is on their neighbor's property on the other side of the fence and not on their property. This is an image of the shed taken from the rear of the structure facing towards the front. Here are the two variances that are being requested. The first is that code requires a minimum 5-foot side yard setback. The shed is only 2 feet from the side property line. The second is that code requires that all accessory structures be located to the rear of the primary dwelling, and this shed is located to the side. Once again, here is the standard variance criteria that must be met in order for the variance to be approved. And then planning staff recommends approval of both variances. The shed is in the exact location as the previous shed that was there for approximately 30 years. The lot is also in a regular shape with limited locations for a shed due to power lines and trees. Planning Commission approved a shed to the side of a house in December of last year at 1036 Arcaro Drive. And Planning Commission also approved a gazebo that was in a sanitary sewer easement in February of this year at 975 Tech Center Drive. However, the Department of Engineering does object to the application. This is due to the shed encroaching into the sanitary sewer easement, but through discussions with engineering, they stated that they would be able to sign off on the location if these variances were approved by Planning Commission. There are also no code requirements, zoning or otherwise, that state that structures must be located outside of easements. The city's mapping also shows that the manhole is on the applicant's property, but the applicant has provided an aerial view showing that it's on their neighbor's property behind the shed. With that, I turn things back to the commission.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kopka. We'll now open to public comment. Is the applicant here? Again, if you could state your name, address, and relationship to the project.
Christy 9361 Canfield Drive, Gahanna, Ohio 43230, and the applicant. We're not denying that the manholes on the shed are on our property. The manhole actually sits behind trees that have been there for over 30 years. There are also guy wires from the phone pole that are in our yard behind the trees. There's also a 6-foot fence behind those guy wires. So even if the shed was moved, you can't get to the manhole cover from accessing through that backyard. This was set up that way prior to us moving into the house in 1994. There is an easement way to get to the manhole cover, but you do have to go through the neighbor's yard also. So it is on our property technically, but you can't access it by the fence that's been there for 30 years, and it is a regulated fence. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I did not receive any public speakers slips, so anyone from the public? Okay, we'll now close public comment and open it up to commission questions. Mr. Chapaka?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Christie, how much space is between the shed and the house?
The shed in the house has approximately 2.5 feet. I can walk through there comfortably with no problem.
Typically, we like to have 3 feet in between there. I know that there's a gas meter. I'm looking at the picture on that side. It's a little tight to go through that space, but there was a shed there before.
There was a shed there when we bought the house in '94.
Was that a movable shed, or did that have a foundation?
That was a metal shed that was on a wood plank at that point in time that we bought it. It's just rusted apart. We had to do something.
So the shed that the shed that's existing, is that movable if it needed to be moved, pushed off to the side? If they had to get to the easement, take the easement?
We would have to call professionals in to move that, and it was brought in on the back of a truck from an Amish-made company.
Is there any electricity that goes to it?
No.
Thanks, Christie. Other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chapaka. Ms. Pollier?
Yes. Did you get a survey done before this shed was
No.
constructed / replaced?
No, we in our mind, we're just saying we're replacing an old piece of supply or whatever, an old building with a new one. So we did not do anything with that, get a survey or anything. We were just within the fence line. We had ample space that we can move between the houses. We made sure that we can get to the gas line and make sure we can get to the fireplace, the chimney, to open that up to clean on a regular basis.
So you replaced a metal shed, correct?
Yes.
With this one that's in our in your application, this wood,
Yes.
looks like it's wood. And did you inquire or ask any questions to anyone?
No,
in
we
city
didn't,
government as
we
far
didn't
as,
even
like, what-
occur to us. We didn't. We were just knowing that the shed needed to be replaced and we wanted to increase our property value, improve it with this shed. The shed that we had actually collapsed in. We had it held up by 4x4s. So we just kind of went on a whim and bought it and brought it in and went at the same place and didn't think we needed to do anything.
If that easement has to be accessed, what are your plans?
Well, they would have to go around the outside of the fence to get to the manhole cover either way. Whether the shed's there or not, they cannot access that manhole cover by going into the backyard.
But the shed would have to be moved.
So with the fence and the guy wires.
Right, but I'm just asking about the shed.
Yeah?
Okay.
I mean, you can walk around the shed. We put a gate in so you can get around the shed with no problem.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
No further questions?
No, I'm sorry. No further questions. I'm sorry.
Thanks. Mr. Greenberg?
Yes, how long has the new shed been there?
New shed was delivered on December 5th
Of last year?
of last year.
Okay. And the previous shed didn't have a application, do you know of?
It was there when we moved in the house in 1994.
Okay. And were there any comments from neighbors about the shed?
I did not receive any, no.
Okay. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Ciano?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Markin?
Also, no questions, I'll have a comment when we get to that.
And I also don't have no questions. So do we have a motion to approve case V-0012-2024?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that application for variance 0011-2024 for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Do I have a second?
Second to Markin.
Thank you to Mr. Markin. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Shapaka? Ms. Polly?
Yes, my concern with this variance is the fact that there was no survey that was done. There was no inquiries that were raised as to what might or might not need to be done to replace the shed. When you're in an incorporated city, you have to assume that there's going to be rules and regulations that have to be followed. And the fact that those were not followed, and basically the shed just came in December and, to replace the shed, I have no problem with where the shed's located. I have no problem with the fact that the shed needed to be replaced. I have an issue with the fact that there was no due diligence done by the applicant. And my concern is setting a precedent for that, to approve a variance because someone essentially didn't do their due diligence. That's my concern with this application. So I'll be voting no.
Thank you, Ms. Polly. Mr. Greenberg?
No further comment.
Mr. Siriano?
I'm going to be in favor of the variance, given that the shed is in the location of the old shed, and that the property is odd-shaped. I agree with Ms. Polly. I wish that there had been due diligence done, but given the applicant had lived there since the mid-'90s and never had a code enforcement violation or issue with the easement prior, it's reasonable to assume that there wouldn't be an issue with the existing shed. So I'm going to be in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Siriano. Mr. Tamarkin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will also be in favor, but I think when we approved the shed at the Acaro Drive address and then the Tech Center Drive pergola or whatever was built there, the picnic area, there was a business in the easement for the drainage and for the underground utilities. I think it was understood, and it was, we want to get it in the notes here in the minutes, that should the city require to dig up that pipe or get to that manhole, they do have a right to ask you to move the shed, which I understand is not easy to do. But when you build on an easement, the easement overrides even what we rule here as far as the variance goes. So, you just have to understand, and, it hasn't happened in 30 years, and the odds are that it won't happen, but you just don't know what the future holds and what the improvements are needed. So there's always the risk that the city approaches you and says that this shed has to be relocated or moved, temporarily moved, so that they can do their utility work. As far as the variance, which really is, 3 foot versus 5 foot from that's required, certainly looks like your neighbor's shed was within the 5 foot, and it looks like there's also a house a little behind you to the right that has a shed close. So precedent says, we will allow variances for the sheds close to property lines, closer, especially your case where it's inside a fence line, it's not even really that visible. So I will be in approval. I will approve it and vote for approval, but again, understanding that in the future, you do have some risk putting it in the easement.
Thank you. And I'm also going to be voting for this. Again, I want to just echo the sentiments of my commission members here. Again, there's been no problem in the past, but that doesn't mean there's going to be an issue in the future. So just be forewarned that something may go wrong, and you may have some issues with this shed. So again, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind going forward. Okay. So with that, we'll call for the roll.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Tomarkin,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes.
Shapaka,
Yes.
Suriano,
Yes.
Pollyea.
No.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and duly noted on those tips.
Okay, the next item is another variance. We have case V-0014-2024 to consider a variance application of various sections 1109.05E, 1A through B of the codified ordinances of the city of Gahanna for property located at 1127 Riva Place, parcel ID 025-007262. Current zoning R1 large lot residential.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. We skipped an application. V-0012 has not been read yet.
Oh, I stand corrected. Get ahead of myself. Okay, let's try this again. So we have case V-0012-2024 to consider a variance application to vary chapter 1171.03I, swimming pool fencing requirements of the codified ordinances of the city of Gahanna for property located at 1129 Brook House Lane, parcel ID 025-009482, current zoning ER-2, Robert Levesque applicant. And Mr. Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael Blackford, Director of Planning. On these next two items, up on the screen right now is a very antiquated-looking zoning map. This is because this request was subject to the zoning code in effect prior to May 1st. As you stated, the property is zoned ER2. We don't see a lot of development within the state residential. This is our larger lot size. The road that they're off of here, this is Brook House Lane. This is 10 units on about 50 acres. Shoal Road. You can see Harrison Pond Drive, so this is Harrison Pond in this area. Morse Road just to the north. And here we have Johnstown 62 here. So the request is relatively simple and straightforward. So our zoning code requires pools to be enclosed by a fence for in-ground pools. So you have to have a fence. The code's a little less concerned about the type of fence, just that you have to have a fence for an in-ground pool, enclosing it between 48 inches and 72 inches in height. It can be a privacy fence, it can be chain link, it can be a wrought iron fence. You know, there's some limitations in the gaps and that. So that's what our code requires. The applicant, they're proposing to have an automatic pool cover in lieu of a fence for an in-ground pool. They've stated that the applicant intent of the code would be observed by permitting an automatic pool cover in lieu of the fence. Again, our code wants safety. This is another means of getting safety there and preventing accidents. They've stated that fencing is not in character with the neighborhood and the improvements would have a positive effect on property value improvement. I would like to state before I go any further, because I know we just talked about it, I know a lot of our variance applications are because of code enforcement action. This particular request and the next one I'll be covering, they filed permits. So this is not in code enforcement action. This is asking for permission rather than forgiveness. Here is the site plan that's in your packet. As soon as it stops glitching in red, oh, there we go. You'll see the location of the proposed pool. Up on the top of the screen, that would be Brookhouse Lane. There's some dimensions there. The two that are most important probably is that there's a 46-foot setback from the property line of the adjacent home there to the west. And I think it's really about 120 feet from pool to structure. And then to the south, it's a 187-foot setback. Again, this particular subdivision is unlike basically every other subdivision in the city, where typically you would see maybe 3 homes to an acre. This is 1 home every 5 acres, so much larger lot size than typical. I won't read all of the variance criteria here related to fences on your screen, but there's a few of them there that are probably more relevant than others with a request like this. I think it's the third one listed there is whether the character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered or whether adjoining properties would suffer a substantial detriment. I know there was in the applicant's application, they talked a little bit about the character of the area, whether the property owner's predicament could be feasibly obviated without a variance. So are there other ways of remedying this? There is. You know, they could have a fence there if we choose. So these are the criteria for fencing. It's a little bit different than the criteria that we just saw in the last request. Staff comments, I mean, again, you know, spirit of the code, in our opinion, is met. Did some research, and state building code does allow for automatic pool covers in lieu of fencing. So state building code has requirements for in-ground pools. It says it can be a fence or an automatic pool cover. And building code, zoning code's about health, safety, and welfare, more so with the building code, so that's built in to the state building code. Our code, when it's above ground pool, you can fence it or you can just have a removable ladder. So it's a lot less standard. I will say that the applicant's application did state that there's no fencing in the area, and at first blush, looking at the area, it does not look like there's any fencing. However, I will show an image, and there is fencing in this particular area. I would say that when we're looking at variances like this, where it's an alternative to what a code is this meeting that requirement of safety or not? One thing that I would say is, if Planning Commission feels that this variance is appropriate and that automatic pool covers are an appropriate alternative to fencing, we might want to think about making that a code change. So I would just throw that out there, because if we allow it once, somebody else is probably going to be asking for it. Obviously, each variance is different. There's uniqueness with this particular property. Again, this is an aerial. All right, here is the property in question. This would be the area of the pool. We can see from the aerial that there is water in the area, whether it's ponds, a creek, or right up here at 1100, there is a pool. And thanks to the magic of the auditor's website, they, for some reason, have a creepy photo of this person's backyard. And you can see with the Shading there with the sun, you can see that there's, right here is the wrought iron fence, and you can see the shadowing there that it produces. So this home is in the neighborhood. They have a pool. They do have fencing. Again, you can kind of see the shadowing of it there. It's very well hidden. I think we went out there, drove by, looking on Google Maps, and you can't even tell that there's fencing or a pool there. So it's very well disguised in this particular residence. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thank you very much. Well, now open public comment. Would the applicant like to speak? If you come up, state your name, address, and relationship to the project.
Sure. Robert Levesque, 1129 Brookhouse Lane, and owner. One thing I'd like to state is that my neighbor to the south actually has a pool as well. It wasn't shown on the picture there, the overview.
Can you talk into the microphone? Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you up here.
Yep, sorry, it was a little.
That's okay.
Little low for me. Yeah, so the neighbor to the south there is on 20 acres. He also has a pool, or they also have a pool, sorry. And then they do not have a fence around theirs as well. And the idea of the auto cover actually came from him because that's what he has. One thing that probably should be said about that property is that is not in the city of Gahanna, but in Jefferson Township. So obviously they're following their own rules there. So just want to be clear on that. The neighbor to the south is in Jefferson Township. So, but outside of that, just here to answer any other questions that anyone may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, I did not get any speaker requests, but is there anyone here in the public who'd like to speak? If you could come up, please. Again, if you could state your name and address, please.
My name is Gary Goldsmith. I'm at 4651 East Johnstown Road. I just have a question on the automatic pool. What happens in the event of power outage? How do you secure the pool with an automatic cover if the power's out, given that we've lost power several times this year already?
That's,
Yeah, if you'd like to answer that.
yeah, whole house generator.
They shut all the gas off when that tornado went through. So none of the backup generators. I'm just worst case scenario.
Okay. Seeing no other public comments, I'll put it up to the commission for questions. Mr.
Thank you,
Chicago?
Mr. Chair. I'm going to take the question on the floor. The cover, is that, if the power goes out, can that be shut manually?
Yes.
I would think that would be the case. And is there a trail or public kind of access to your property?
No, there are none.
Are there a lot of kids or neighborhoods play in the yard at all that come over?
No, we are probably the youngest couple in the neighborhood by about 20 years.
So you're not hosting a Saturday football game with the kids playing in the backyard?
No, sir.
And for your enjoyment, your family enjoyment only, is how you see to use the pool?
That's correct, yes.
So if your neighbor didn't have a cover and he had a fence on there, would you be putting in a fence?
Could you repeat the question?
If your neighbor did not have a cover that gave you the inspiration and he had a fence on it, I mean, would you be putting in a fence?
I'm not sure. It's a difficult question to answer. I mean, I think that cover is obviously a brilliant idea as far as safety and convenience. I mean, I know that just on your phone, if it's not closed, it will tell you after a given certain time that it's not closed, and then just put on your phone and close it. So, yeah, I'm not sure. Not sure about that.
All right. Thank you. No other questions?
Ms. Pauline?
Thank you. My questions concern the safety of this electronic cover. Is there any kind of like a shut-off valve or something like that where if it malfunctions, You know, if people are in the pool, I saw this in a movie one time where there were people in the pool and they ended up drowning because the cover malfunctioned and people couldn't get out. I just want to know if there's like any kind of a safety mechanism for shutting it down if need be.
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I don't know if it operates like a garage door, if it hits something of resistance, if it were to go backwards or not. That's something I can certainly find out for you. It's from the
Okay.
installer, but
And
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what kind of force it
Okay.
actually generates.
do you have anything, is there any kind of an app on your phone where you can kind of check to see like what it's doing, if it's open or closed?
Yeah, absolutely.
You do have that capability?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it will alert you as to, after a certain time that it's open, that it's, would still be open or not.
Okay, okay. And can you just summarize a little bit, what is the reasoning again? I read your application and I guess I was just kind of trying to figure out what the
So-
reasoning was for not being able to do a fence.
Right. If you look at, and it's very difficult to tell here because I have another application in for the terrace that is currently outlined behind the house. Currently there, the marker is. And if you look at the outline around the pool area would be the patio. So that would be like the walkout basement patio at pool level and then the second story terrace. And I have pictures and everything of the renderings of what that would look like, which obviously aren't here for this because it's a separate application altogether. But just given the character of how that patio flows from the house and in the terrace to the pool, it just would absolutely look ridiculous, in all honesty.
I'm sorry, I didn't,
It would just look ridiculous to have a fence between, you know, the pool with the patio to the terrace and the stairs.
okay, I don't have anything further, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Greenberg?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you explain how this works for
So,
how the whole thing, what equipment there is and how is
Right.
it all put
sure,
together?
so it would be, basically, it's run on rails that are attached to the pool itself. So you would have the typical pavers on top of the patio, right? And then, you know, you'd have the coping that kind of goes back to the pool, and then you'd have the pool wall. Well, right underneath the coping would be the rails that this glides down, this cover sits on and glides down. So, you know, your typical pool cover is something that's on top of the pool and gets, you know, put down on the patio and so forth. This is actually a part of the pool and under the pavers, if you will. And at one end there, where it rolls up into the casing, basically, there's a motor that drives that. The power is put to a switch, which is where you would open and close the pool via, you know, a touchpad switch.
And it gets energized and, you know, there's no chance of electrical shock for anyone?
Oh, no, it's completely separate compartmentalized from the pool itself.
Okay. That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Siriano?
Yes, actually, my question is for Mr. Roth, and I think I know the answer to this. I just wanted to be certain. In the instance that this variance is approved without a fence, the city would not assume any risk relative to an estate property. Is that correct? I mean, the risk is all on the homeowner.
Correct. This is an administrative panel. We're going to have immunity unless you're acting completely recklessly. There isn't any, I don't see any risk of liability here if something happened on Mr. Levesque's property. as a result of this decision.
Got it. And I guess question for staff, code dictates fencing around a pool. Does it have to be a certain distance away from the pool?
Just says enclose.
So if the perimeter of the backyard were enclosed with a fence?
Correct. It has to be on the property that the pool's there. So a lot of times that's around the perimeter of the property, not around the pool, but it could be either one. Yes,
Got
sir.
it. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Serrano. Mr. Tamarkin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Levesque, did you run this by your property insurance company?
No.
So I work for Allstate, and I did run it by mine. I don't do homes. They would not cover a home with no fence, a pool with no fence. They would deny it and wouldn't do it. So I think that's a concern. You know, I don't know who insures your home, but my guy tells me that most of the insurance companies would not cover a pool without a fence. Too much liability there, so duly noted. You mentioned that a fence around the pool would look ridiculous. My vision would be that the fence would kind of somehow tie into the house and be three-sided, not four-sided. That the house would act as a barrier on the home side, and then you have to, if you had to do a fence, you'd have to do the other three sides, similar to the other home on the property that was fenced, or on the other home on the street that had a fence around the pool. Tell me real quick on this cover, what happens when it rains? Does the water pool on the top? Does it flow somehow around the cover and into the pool?
So that's a great question. I just found this out 2 days ago, that it does pool on the top of the cover, and there's a separate motor that pumps the water off of the cover, actually. So it will drain back into the housing of the cover, and then it's pumped out.
So it doesn't pool on there for a long period of time?
No.
Until you open it and push it into the pool or somewhere? Can the cover hold the weight of a person?
Absolutely.
If you fall, if you trip into the pool, it's going to hold you?
Yes.
Okay.
To your point about the insurance, that brings up that's a good point. I should ask, honestly, my neighbor to the south who he has for coverage.
Right. And if if they know that he doesn't have a fence, and if they've inspected the property.
Good point.
Mr. Chair, that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Markin. My only question is for Mr. Blackford. Have we done pool variances like this before for fencing?
Not to my knowledge, sir, no.
Okay, so this would be,
This would be new, and that's why I had mentioned, like, hey, if this is a viable alternative, we might want to consider code changes. We do get touch points from folks every once in a while about fencing, and usually it's more extreme, not less, but people in the community wanting more fencing.
okay, understood. And a question for the applicant, is there, your installer, is it a local company? Is it someone out of state? Who's doing this for
For
you?
the pool? Yeah.
Well, the pool cover specifically.
Yeah, same company, Sunshine Pools out of Mount Vernon.
Okay. Okay, that's all I had. So with that, I will close the public comment. Do we have a motion to approve V-0012-2024?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve item V-0012-2024.
We have a motion by Mr. Suriano. Do we have a second?
Second, Shipaka.
Second by Mr. Shipaka. Any discussion on the motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. The state has, they accept this kind of a product in lieu of the fence. I've specified a few of those on a few projects. It is like elephant skin that you can walk on it. I am a little bit leery about the liability end of it. And looking at that, I will be in favor of the variance, but it's more of the appearance of it. Yeah, I mean, I can buy that, having a fence. How far does the fence go out? Kind of a deal. And I would say that even with this product in there, if you get animals coming by, something else comes by, you will maybe put up a fence to deter that. So it really just isn't the pool. But I think living in the woods, having all that tree and all the debris blowing in, you would have a cover anyway, even if you did have a fence. But, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Schmacka. Ms. Polly?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really struggling with this one, just due to the fact that, well, I appreciate the safety, kind of, you alleviating some of my safety concerns. You have the whole house generator, which helps. You have an app on your phone, which helps. My concern, though, is something called the attractive nuisance doctrine, which is something that the Ohio Supreme Court adopted in 2001. We were the 47th state to do that. And basically what that says is that a landowner can be liable for injuries to children trespassing on their land if that injury is caused by a hazardous object or condition that is likely to attract children who are unable to appreciate that risk. And the Ohio Supreme Court has specifically stated that pools are an attractive nuisance. And I understand that there may not be children living in the area, but people that come to visit, anything like that, if there's no fence, that is a concern to me. And the Ohio Supreme Court actually considered a case, which is how they made their decision, and it involved a property where fences had been removed. So that's my main concern with this. I understand the aesthetic issue that you've mentioned, but my concern really is above and beyond is safety. So that's why I will be voting no for this variance.
Thank you, Ms. Mollier. Mr. Greenberg?
I too had concerns when I first read the application. Mr. Roth addressed one of the concerns, whether the city would have any liability, and I'm glad to hear that that is not the case. I think the city has had code for many years that you have to have a fence around the pool. And I think we're setting big precedent here. Once we make the decision, if we approve this, that it's going to be one of the options on the table for homeowners to use. And the problem is we don't have a lot of examples on how it's worked. And so I'm going to be in favor, but with those questions still out there.
Mr. Giano?
Yeah, I'm going to be in favor of this variance, noting some of my colleagues, you know, I am a little bit leery around just the risk that maybe you're assuming as a homeowner, but given that that Ohio Building Code has adopted this as a within, you know, pool covers within a certain standard can supplement for fences. I think that you know, Mr. Greenberg, hearing your kind of comments around setting a precedent, each variance, you know, my belief is it's taken on a case-by-case basis. This, you know, just because we approve a variance on this property does not necessarily mean that it's apples to apples on the next property. Given the proximity, the location of this property, and you know, there isn't a lot of foot traffic back in this location. Given the pool will be covered, and you know, have that measure in place, so long as the city is not at risk, and the homeowner is, you know, comfortable with that degree of risk, I'm in favor of the variance.
Thank you, Mr. Giano. Mr. Tamarkin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also have concerns, number of them here. First, we did receive a letter, Mr. Chair, from a neighbor.
Yes.
To read into that will be attached to the record. The neighbor didn't really say whether he was opposed or not. He left it kind of open, but, you know, to read real quick, the pool is approximately 60 feet from our children's playground that is used by his grandchildren. We have 14 grandchildren, of which 11 are under the age of 8, and use the playground extensively during the summer. Skipping a little, can you guarantee that our grandchildren cannot possibly drown in the pool? So there is a concern from a neighbor. You know, the electronic pool cover is nice. It is interesting that Ohio Building Code allows it. But the pool cover also is only as good as that it's closed, whenever the pool's not in use. So, certainly up to the homeowner that if friends are over and they're out late and they're at the pool and that they're going to use it again in the morning, that it's not left open, that the pool, that they don't run to the store and that cover is always closed when the pool's not in use. And, there's certainly no guarantees of that. And the third is, as my colleagues stated, with the precedent, I think it's a bad precedent to set. I think even though every variance is on its own, and we certainly see lots of variances here, this is our third one today of 4 or 5 that we'll still see today. A pool variance to me is a line I'm not willing to cross as far as a fence on the pool. So I'm going to be voting no on this, and I just think the code says a pool needs a fence. I'm going to stick to a pool needs a fence.
Thank you, Mr. Markin. And I'm also going to be voting no. I think that we're going into some, pardon the pun, some really dangerous waters here. And I just don't want to have that weighing on me. As Mr. Markin, I think, said very clearly that the code says that it's a pool, it needs a fence. And I really think that in something as critical a safety issue, we really need to abide by that. So my vote's going to be no. So hearing that, clerk, please call the roll.
Soriano.
Yes.
Chapaca.
Yes.
Tamarkin.
No.
Pollyea. Greenberg.
Yes.
Mako.
No. So
We need Mr. Hicks here.
we need Mr. Hicks here. So with the tie vote, am I correct to assume that motion fails? Motion fails.
Thank you.
Okay, now we come to the next variance case. We have variance case V-0014-2024 to consider a variance application to vary sections 1109.05E 1A through B, codified ordinances of the city of Gahanna for property located at 1127 Riva Place, parcel ID 025-007-262, current zoning R1, large lot residential, Cheyenne Price applicant. And again, recognize Mr. Blackford for a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This request, unlike our last request, is under the new zoning code, the code that was effective May 1st of this year. The zoning of this property is R1, which is large lot residential. That's lots in around the 15,000 square foot range or so. So this particular request, kind of like with our last one, a permit was filed under our new code. Through that permit review for the fence, it was determined that a variance was necessary to allow it in its proposed location. So they would like to have a privacy fence, 6 feet in height, be located within the front yard. It would be what we consider the second front yard from the zoning code. 8 feet is what is requested. Here I'll go over our code history with fences here very briefly. So for about 60 years, we said no fencing in the side or rear yard, side or front yard for privacy fences. And then we kept having a bunch of variances, so we changed the code in late 2020, I think it was. So for corner lots, when it was that second front yard that functioned like a side yard, we kept seeing those variances, so we amended the code to allow the privacy fence to be located half the distance of the setback. So if it was a 35-foot setback, like in this case, 17.5 feet is what would be allowed. Fast forward to 2024, May 1st, with the new zoning code. And quite honestly, the code language that we had adopted did not make it into the new code. That was not intentional by staff's. Anything intentional, that code was working relatively well. So we do have that on our list of code changes. Intentional or not, the code doesn't allow it, went back to the way it was in early 2020, which is, again, no fencing allowed in that, privacy fencing on the corner lot. So here's our site plan. I'm going to accentuate some of the features here in green. This is the requested location. That's a Riva Ridge Boulevard that it That would be the second front yard. Again, the one that functions like a side yard. This here in bluish is where the code would permit it, 35 feet. And then here's the approximate location where the code previously allowed it, splitting the difference sort of there of 17.5 feet. So again, code today says 35 feet from the front yard. They're asking for 8 feet. The prior code was 17.5 feet. So there's two code sections. One says no fencing shall extend beyond the front of the house, which this does, because again, it's 35 feet and it's down to 8 feet. So it extends 17 feet beyond the front, 27 feet beyond the front of the house. Privacy fence is prohibited in the front yard. So those are the two code sections. The variance criteria is a little bit different on this one. It's the new code. All the same variance criteria, no matter what the request is. Is the variance likely to result in substantial change to the essential character of the neighborhood? I'll talk about that very briefly after this. Would the variance not likely result in damage to adjoining properties? I don't think there's any debate about that. It doesn't appear that the fence would cause any issues there. The fence, according to staff, again, this was reviewed by staff. There's no open staff comments, no objections from staff about the delivery of governmental services or the site triangle. Would there be environmental impacts? Is it necessary for the economical use of the property? And then would it undermine the objectives of the land use plan? We don't really talk about fencing on yards and land use plan. So really the main one that, in staff's opinion, applies to this case is sort of this first one, which is the variance substantial and is in character with the area. Staff, my recommendation would be approval with modification. Staff would recommend that the variance be approved at 17.5 feet. That's what the prior code allowed, and quite honestly, it was an inadvertent, it was supposed to be a copy and replace of the fence, and they must have copied and replaced an old version, and I didn't catch that. So it was intended always to be 17.5 feet, not the 8 feet that they're requesting, and not the 35 feet that's allowed by code. I will say that I'm very familiar with this particular neighborhood, this Bryn Mawr area. Lived there for many years, drove by it recently, and just to see, and in the staff's opinion, that front yard fencing is essentially, it's non-existent in this neighborhood. So 17.5 feet, quite honestly, is a little out of character, but 8 feet would be extremely out of character in staff's opinion. This is going back to that opening slide there. Everything you see in yellow, or basically everything in yellow here, is all part of the Bryn Mawr plat. This was Rose Run. So it all kind of functions as one development. And by my count on this map in yellow, there are 56 corner lots. I did not go to all those, but having lived in that area and also traveling in this area as I went through, I did not see one single corner lot fence extending beyond the house. So again, staff is of the opinion that 8 feet would be out of character. We would recommend 17.5 feet. We do anticipate you being in front of Planning Commission and City Council later this year with code amendments to our new zoning code. This would be one of them. And again, it would go back to what we had previously in place. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to you. I'll be happy to explain anything more clearly if I need to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blackford. We'll now open the public comment. Would the applicant like to speak? Again, if you could state your name, address, and relationship to the project.
Hi, I'm Cheyenne Price, 1127 Riva Place. I'm one of the owners. I'm just going to read what I have typed up on behalf of myself and Ian Wilson, my significant other. He couldn't be here due to work. We have a couple issues with the 17.5-foot recommendation. To start, on May 30th, we had an initial staff report submitted to our account, and it stated, the request has been reviewed by the appropriate city staff, and there are no stated objections to the variance, and recommendation was approval as submitted. It even explicitly acknowledged that the 8-foot setback is approximately half of what city code requires, yet it still recommended approval as submitted. We are very happy with this initial recommendation, considering all of the appropriate committees, building, engineering, fire, police, parks, and planning had all signed off on it with no comments to add. It was on June 3rd when we got a second staff report submitted, which entailed the concerns of the 8 feet from 35 feet, how that's a very large difference. My first point, I just disagree that it would be out of character with the neighborhood. Our neighborhood does contain a number of privacy fences. I just feel that we should not be penalized for the coincidence that corner lot neighbors have simply chosen not to erect privacy fences. In fact, one of the neighbors directly behind us that we share a property line with has a privacy fence. He's just not on a corner lot. But should any of the corner lot neighbors in our vicinity choose to do so, just with the positioning of their houses on their lots and their lot sizes, their privacy fences would have a smaller setback than ours would with the variance, or about the same size, just based on, where everything sits. I would like to point out that if we have the fence installed, whether or not the variance is approved or not, we do plan on landscaping outside of the fence. We do think our neighborhood's beautiful. We want to keep it that way. And planting shrubbery will hide it from view. It will also just help improve the beauty of the neighborhood in general. We have talked to some of our neighbors just over the course of 2 years. Nobody that we've talked to has seemed to have an issue with our proposed fence location. So that's another thing that was encouraging us to file this variance. But our main grievance is that regardless of the opinions of our neighbors, in favor or not in favor of the fence, we don't live in an HOA neighborhood. In fact, our neighborhood had a poll a few weeks ago on Facebook just if we should reinstate it. Apparently, the neighborhood used to have an HOA. It was overwhelmingly voted against, and the poll was actually taken down in only a few hours. So we were just in favor of the variance being granted because none of the appropriate committees found any safety, engineering, none of those sorts of issues. So we just don't want our home to be evaluated based on appearance and nothing more. In fact, Ian and I, this is our first home together. We tried so very hard with our realtor to find a home not in an HOA neighborhood for this exact reason. We just have 2 dogs, and we, sorry, I lost my place a little bit. Oh, I see. Anyway, Ian and I have 2 dogs, and from the second we viewed this house, we've dreamed of nothing more than fencing in our yard to let our dogs run free. And we plan on being in this neighborhood for many years to come, so we feel that although it's an established neighborhood of 30 years is a long time and change should be allowed to happen. Granting our request will not diminish the character of the neighborhood or in any way make it appear less desirable. And regardless of whether or not this variance is approved, a privacy fence, it seems that it would be approved to be installed, regardless of this variance. It's going to be visible from the road at 17.5 feet. It's going to be visible from the road at 8.5 feet. The 17.5-foot setback is not going to make it any less visible, but by granting the variance, you'll be giving us significantly more square footage for us to run around with our dogs and our nieces and nephews, and just, you can't tell up there, but just based on the way our yard is set up, the backyard has lots of trees, very hilly, and the side yard is primarily what we want to get use out of with a fence for slip and slide, playing fetch with the dogs, just things of that nature. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and open it up to the commission for questions. Mr. Chapaka?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Blackford, is there sidewalks currently there?
Yes, sir.
And how close to the sidewalk would the 8-foot fence be?
I couldn't, probably about 8, 9 feet. I don't know. I didn't review this request, so I'm
about
not as
9
familiar
feet.
as some.
About 9 or 10 feet for landscaping? And do you have an area with the trees, the tree line, and how much of the property is hidden or consists of trees? Sorry, I thought that was in the package.
Again,
So Shannon, how big are the puppies?
I have a 30-pound cattle dog mix, and I have a little chihuahua, which is why any sort of other fence wouldn't work. They'd just be able to slip right through like, for example, one of our neighbors has a wrought iron fence that just, there'd be no point in putting it up.
All right, well, thank you. I have no other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chapaka. Ms. Pauline?
I just have one question. I was just reading your application. Can you just kind of expand on the reason for why the side yard area needs to be used for your dogs and for slip and slides and things like that, and why other portions of your yard can't be used for that purpose?
Yeah, so I don't know how well you can tell, but we have a back deck. In the backyard itself, there are quite a few trees, just some garden beds, and then kind of separating the backyard from the side yard, there's actually a large mound with bushes, trees, plants that was there when we moved in. So it's a great backyard to have. However, if we ever wanted to do anything with our nieces and nephews that involved a slip and slide, nobody really wants to get wet in the shade. Also, it's hilly and it's not flat, like we just couldn't do that. Okay. And as far as the side yard for the dogs, it's just an open, flat space. I want to be able to play fetch with them and run back and forth without zigzagging around all these things. And we kind of mapped out where the 17.5-foot setback would put our fence. Towards the back of the property, it gives us a decent amount of space, but towards the front, just because our house is kind of crooked on the property, it just kind of makes the inside and the outside of the fence unusable, in our opinion. It's just too narrow on either side to do anything, which is honestly the main reason for our request.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Greenberg?
Just a question on the privacy aspect of it. I mean, is it slats that are going to go up, what, 6 feet?
That's our plan, yeah. And then on the outside of it, like I said, we plan to do all sorts of landscaping to kind of obscure it from view as best we can on the outside.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ciano?
Yeah, is the fence as sketched, I'm looking at the survey, is it within, it looks like there's a 15-foot easement from River Ridge Boulevard?
Yeah. So in our original fence permit, not the variance, engineering signed off on that, basically just said, be aware that this is here, we have no issues with it. But the only thing, like in the top, there's a manhole, and we're keeping a 3-foot distance on all sides, so it's kind of gonna be like an L shape in that back corner.
And, okay, so it is within the easement.
Yes.
And then, so it looks like the distance from, I'm trying to decipher from the survey, the property line, is that the edge of the, that's not the curb's edge of River Ridge, I'm guessing, do you know what that line dictates? Is it the inside edge of the sidewalk? Is it?
Which line, I'm sorry?
So the
Just
line
on
that says
River
118.92 feet, that you've dimensioned the 8 foot from, you've dimensioned the 8 foot from property line
Oh,
to that
yes.
line. Well, I'm just trying to, because the survey doesn't indicate where the road location is or the curb location, I'm just trying to figure out where that line is relative to a map.
So our property line is like 14 inches inside of the sidewalk. So the proposed fence would be, that little over a foot, plus the sidewalk, plus another good 3 or 4 feet of grass until you even get to the road.
Okay.
So we want it 8 feet from, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. I think those are my questions.
Mr. Markin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the back, you have a raised mound with landscaping. Does the fence cut through that or come in front of it?
The mound is
Between the house and the mound?
kind of right in the middle of that big open area
Yep.
to the back corner of the house. Yep, right about there.
So how's the fence compared to, where's the fence go compared to the mound?
Where the green, I don't know if you can see the color. It's just, the mound is going to be within it. It's not going to,
It's going to be inside the fence?
yes. The mound provides us with some privacy during the summer, but obviously trees die during the winter, so then it's just not really doing anything for us.
Good. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. One quick question. Have you run this by your neighbors? Any concern from your neighbors or anyone?
Not explicitly, hey, we're filing a variance for this reason, but just over the course of the 2 years that we've lived here, we have discussed our plans to put up a fence, just in casual conversation, told them about where we want it. Nobody's objected to us, so.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing other questions, do I have a motion to approve case V-0013-2024?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion for approval of variance 0014-2024, 1127 Riva Place.
Thank you, Mr. Markin. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Ms. Pollier. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the 8-foot, I'm having an issue with the 8-foot. I think the 17.5-foot for the neighborhood and the history of the neighborhood is weighing heavily on my decision. So I'm not in favor of the variance for the 8-foot. The 6-foot in the front yard, that's not a variance request, correct, Mr. Blackford? The 6-foot privacy fence in the front yard is now acceptable.
No, so the privacy fence is not allowed in the front yard. It would be 35 feet by code, essentially, for this lot. So 17.5 feet would be a variance, 8 feet would be a variance as well.
So I'm in favor of the privacy fence being in the front, but not the distance. So I would, as it sits now, I'm not in favor of, but I would be in favor if it was 17.5 feet. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Pollier?
Yes, thank you. I agree with that as well. And the fact that it's not in character with the neighborhood bothers me a little bit, but I find that the application is extremely well-researched, well thought out, and I understand the need for it in this situation due to the rest of the property and the way it's laid out. So given that, I'll be voting yes.
Thank you, Ms. Pollier. Mr. Greenberg?
No comments.
Mr. Shiano?
Yep, I agree with Mr. Shapaka. I think that given a corner lot, the fact that, the applicant is kind of saddled with having essentially two front yards is a really I would call that, a situation that, a circumstance that's difficult for use of the property. However, in this case, I think 8 feet and the distance to the right-of-way and property line just is really out of character. I'm just going all up and down Riva Ridge Boulevard, any corner lot location, since the fences are set back. While I agree that 35 feet is probably overkill, I think that 8 feet is too close and really out of character. So I won't be in favor of the fence.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Soriano. Mr. Tamarkin?
Mr. Chair, I agree with Mr. Soriano. I appreciate the use of the property, but I agree that 8 foot is just too close to the property line and not in keeping with the look and the feel of the neighborhood. And again, another precedent that I'm not willing to set. So I'm going to say no to this, but I would be in support of 17 foot, which Mr. Blackford, my understanding is we would have to come back with a separate variance.
You can amend a variance, so if somebody wanted to make a motion to allow a privacy fence 6 feet in height, 17.5 feet from Riva Ridge, that could be a motion tonight if desired. Would not necessitate a new submittal. If there's a vote and it's a no vote, then it would be a new application.
So I will be on record of saying I am not in support of 8 foot, but if the applicant and the chair would like to refile or propose an amendment for 17.5 foot, I would be in favor of that.
Okay, and
Kind of put you on the spot.
that's why I make the big bucks. So I'm also going to be voting no as it stands now. However, what is being said, and I think we have a pretty good sense of kind of where we're coming from. If you're amenable to the 17.5 foot option, I'll be more than happy to entertain that tonight.
So my main question is, we actually tried to file the permit before the May 1st change. We went on the website to download the forms April 30th, but unfortunately it had already been taken off the website, which is why we ended up filing May 1st, putting us in the position we're in. So we would have actually been filing a variance for the same 8 feet, but from 17.5 foot instead, which leads me to my question. Is there any middle ground that anybody would be willing to compromise on? Simply because of what I said, the 17.5 foot, when we measured out, makes the front half of the yard just not usable inside or outside the fence. It's just I mean, we'd get a fence, that'd be nice, but I'd like to be able to enjoy the entirety of the fenced-in area. So that's my question.
Mr. Blackford, can you bring up the drawing again with the 3 lines? Would you have a yellow line, a red line? Would you have 8 foot? So the green is the 8 foot, the yellow is 17 and a half, and the blue is the permitted of 35.
Yeah.
Correct.
And if you see on the plans, kind of between the yellow and the blue towards the front, that's where our main gate is going to be, just for getting the mowers in and out, getting the garbage in and out, because that's where our garbage spot is. So it's just barely wide enough for that sort of thing, because we want it to be a double gate. So we were just hoping, if not 8 feet, something between 17 and a half foot and 8, just to make it more usable. And I do ask you to keep in mind, it's 8 feet from the property line, which is still over a foot from the sidewalk, and then all that distance to the road. So it's really not that visible or out of character with the neighborhood.
Mr. Chair, I have a comment.
Mr. Shpaga?
I would entertain 15 feet. So I would like to make a motion to amend the variance application to allow a 6-foot-high fence at 15 feet from River Ridge.
Okay, we have a new motion. Is there a second on that?
I'll second that. Tamarkin?
Seconded by Tamarkin, and we'll open it up for discussion.
Mr. Chair, do we have to withdraw the motion?
I would prefer if you tied off that loose end, because we had a
Okay.
motion and a second originally. And I'm okay with you not voting yes or no on that, but can we withdraw that before we consider the second motion?
So I will withdraw the motion for variance V-0014-2024 for the fence at the 8 foot on 1127 Riva Place.
Okay, do I have a second on that?
Second, Shpaga.
Okay, and we should vote on that withdrawing?
No.
I don't think you need to vote
We
on
don't?
that.
Okay,
If you feel the panel, that's what the panel wants to do, you can withdraw it based on what's been said.
okay, so let the record show that I'm okay with withdrawing that first motion, and we're going to have a new motion made by Mr. Shpaga.
Yes. I'd like to make a motion to allow the 6-foot-high privacy fence 15 feet off of Riva Ridge.
And we had a second
Tamarkin.
by Tamarkin, and we'll go and have some discussion. Mr. Shpaga?
I'm in favor of it.
Okay. Ms. Molly?
I don't have any comments.
Ms. Greenberg?
No comments.
Mr. Yano?
Given the survey, I believe that 15-foot marker puts it within, outside of the easement, which I would be in favor of.
Mr. Tamarkin?
In recognizing the applicants and the homeowners' need for space and use there, I will also be in favor.
Okay, and I'll put it up to you. Would you be okay with the 15-foot?
It's better than 17 and a half feet. Yeah.
Okay. So clerk, please call the roll.
Shapaka,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Soriano,
Yes.
Pollyea,
Yes.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Mako.
Yes. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our last variance for the night is variance case V-0013-2024 to consider a variance application to vary sections 1165.08A and 1165.08B1 of the codified ordinances of the city of Gahanna for property located at 2023 Crescent Boulevard, parcel ID 025-014172, current zoning SCPD, orthopedic 1, Kelly Cochran applicant. Ms. Kapka, you have a presentation?
This is the final variance application of the night at 2023 Crescent Boulevard. This is the Orthopedic 1 site as part of the Crescent at Central Park development. This application was also filed under the previous zoning code, so the zoning district is SCPD. The applicant is requesting approval of 2 variances for 197.56 square footage of wall signage. Design review, final development plan, and variance applications were approved for Orthopedic 1 in May of last year. The same signage was shown in these applications. However, signage is not approved by Planning Commission, which is why these applications are now before you today. The proposed sign package includes 3 wall signs, which exceed both maximum total signage requirements and maximum wall signage requirements. Here is a zoomed-in image of the site. So you can see here that the majority of the site's frontage is along the I-270 on-ramp. There is a little bit of frontage on Tech Center Drive, but as of right now, there are no monument signs proposed along Tech Center, which is why the applicant would like to have a greater amount of wall signage to account for that. Here is a rendering that shows the location of the proposed signage. Sign 1 is on the northernmost portion of the building along the I-270 ramp, and signs 2 and 3 are on the west facade of the building. Here is a site plan specifically calling out the locations of each sign. Signs 1 and 3 are both 49 square feet and located on the northernmost and southernmost portions of the building. Sign 2 is the largest at 99.56 square feet and is on the primary facade of the building right near the entrance. Here are the 2 specific variances that are being requested, both of which are to permanent sign standards. The first is that code allows a maximum of 150 square feet of signage for an entire site. So this is the total area of every single sign on a single site. The applicant proposes approximately 47 square feet of signage above 150. The next is that code allows a maximum of 50 square feet total of wall signage for an entire site. So this is similar in that every single wall sign on the site added together needs to equal 50 square feet or below. The applicant proposes 147 square feet above this requirement. Here is the variance criteria for signage. It's similar to the fence variance criteria in that the property owner must show that practical difficulties have been encountered. In order for that to be determined, this is the variance criteria that is considered by Planning Commission. Staff recommends approval of both variants as submitted due to the frontage along I-270. The site is also at the end of a cul-de-sac and does not have much visibility from Tech Center Drive or Hamilton Road. Additionally, the new zoning code would allow up to 400 square feet total of signage at this site. So if the application were filed today, they would only be requesting 1 variance instead of 2. And with that, I turn things back over to Planning Commission.
Thank you, Ms. Kopka. We will now open public comment. Would the applicant care to speak? And if you can state your name, address, in relationship to the project.
Craig Rutkowski, 11076 Center Village Road, Galena, Ohio. I'm project manager for the architecture firm Moody Nolan, and we're the architect of record for this project. Really, it's about sight distance of the building off of the main roads. We do have great frontage along 270, but it's about wayfinding for us and getting signage that's appropriate for the distance of these buildings off the main road. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Now, anyone from the public care to speak? Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment and open it up to questions from the commission. Mr. Chapaka?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Pollyanna?
Thank you. No questions as well.
Mr. Greenberg?
I have a question for Mr. Blackford or Ms. Kapka. Is the, Ms. Kapka then, the other facilities have a master sign, which all the signs have to follow. Do we not have that at the Crescent?
No, we do not. We have a master sign plan for some properties along Buckles Court, I believe.
I believe the only master sign plan is for the lot on the extreme right-hand side of your screen, and that was for a multi-tenant building. This particular building is just one tenant, so they do not have to have a master sign plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Mr. Ciano?
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Markin?
One quick question. Mr. Blackford or Mr. Kapka, can you pull up the west view or the view of the buildings where the signs are? So on the top picture there, in fairly large numbers is the address. Is that a sign? And does that count as part of the sign?
No, address numbers are exempt. They are not considered signage.
Okay. That is my only question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Markin. Quick question for the applicant. The request that you're submitting tonight, is this similar to other projects that you've worked on with significant frontage on interstates? The scale you're asking for?
The scale is actually more proportional to what we asked for in Westerville, where our first building was done with this design. So the signage there was also similar, where we were pushed off of Polaris. So we were trying to size that sign so it was proportional to the architecture, but also was seen from the street. We have done buildings along freeways. We always try to maximize the signs along freeways, so it's a billboard form. That wasn't the intent here. This is more about wayfinding to get us from Hamilton over to Tech Center onto the site. Do I answer your question?
You did, yes. Thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions, do I have a motion to approve V-0013-2024?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion for the approval of the variance application V0013-2024.
Thank you, Mr. Packer. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Ms. Pollier. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I will be voting in favor of it. I think the signage where it's located at along the highway and the, actually the restraint that's used in the graphics in it complements the building greatly. Strong favor of it.
Thank you, Mr. Packer. Ms. Pollier?
No comments.
Mr. Greenberg?
No comment, thank you.
Mr. Yano?
No comments.
Mr. Markin?
Quick comment, Mr. Chair. I will be in favor. I think, for the size of the building, and we just had a property that had two fronts on a street corner. This building kind of has two fronts too, with the side facing the highway. So the size of the signs for the size of the buildings with frontage to Buckles and Hamilton, and also to the highway, the signs are more than appropriate for this kind of building.
Thank you, Mr. Markin. My only comment is that I'll be voting in favor of this. Again, I think it's appropriate for the site and the location, so I will be voting in favor. Clerk, please call the roll.
Shapaka,
Yes.
Pollier,
Yes.
Tamarkin,
Yes.
Greenberg,
Yes.
Mako,
Yes,
Suriano.
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our final item tonight is a development plan application, DP-0001-2024, to consider a development plan application for property located at Morris Road, parcel ID 025-01-1219, current zoning R4, multi-unit residential, Elliott Park, Douglas Urban, applicant. Mr. Blackford has a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to keep my presentation briefer than usual, and I'll do my best not to steal any thunder from Mr. Irvin, who will be giving a presentation here shortly. So a few slides for you tonight. First up on the screen is the location and zoning map. Most of you on here, this might look familiar. I'll go over project history here very shortly. I believe this is about 14 acres. It's zoned R4. R4, this is under our new zoning code. This is our multi-unit zoning designation. You can see that there's hundreds of acres of similarly zoned property on the Morse Road and Johnstown Road corridor here. What is that project history? Well, in 2022, we had a number of meetings and a lot of discussion, and that property was rezoned from estate residential to multifamily, allow for multifamily development. Early in 2023, they started the tree clearing process. Shortly thereafter, they were in front of Planning Commission for their final development plan and design review approvals. Those were for 251 units. That is the same density that they're requesting today. That is the same unit total as the rezoning. So that has all stayed consistent. The 2024 request before you is relatively straightforward in staff's opinion. What do I mean by that? I'll cover that here briefly, but some of the things that they're changing are removing constructed wetlands. So we do not have a wetland local city. You know, there wasn't a wetland preservation component to the rezoning. These are constructed wetlands, which means that they're being built to serve, you know, some sort of purpose. It wasn't preserved wetlands. They're removing a couple of areas. We'll look at that here shortly. They redesigned the clubhouse. They turned 2 apartment buildings that were adjacent to the clubhouse into townhome buildings. That's perfectly fine from a zoning standpoint. You know, we're not, zoning doesn't regulate what type of multiple unit building it is, just if it's a multi-unit building or not. And because the townhomes are less density, I think there were 4 in each building, and there were 6 apartments. There's some apartments that are added above some garages. This is from your staff report, as you can see. I just took a screenshot there. This is actually the 2023 final development plan. I know the Mr. Irvin, he's got the current one, so he'll cover that. But again, just highlighting there, you know, where those changes are. Those 2 green areas that say constructed wetlands, those are now, I think one's a pickleball court, the one by the clubhouse, and the one in the northeast corner of the site is just open space. There in red, that's the 2 garages where garage buildings where units were added. And there in yellow, I believe the applicant's going to cover a little bit more detail, some of the design changes related to the clubhouse building and then those townhomes. Development plan criteria in the new code is the same as the old code. I guess you'll just have to take my word for it. What it says plan meets applicable development standards. We covered a lot of the land use plan really with the rezoning. Is it in accord with plans for the area? Does it meet development standards? Unlike the first 5 applications, this is not a variance request. There is not an associated variance with this application. Staff finds that all these are met. Again, the use is permitted by right. The use is consistent with the zoning that went through the rezoning process in 2022. It's the use and the density is unchanged. Building height is unchanged. The development footprint is unchanged. No variances. It's rare staff ever gets to say these things. So with that, I'm going to conclude staff's presentation, because I know the applicant has a presentation for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Blackford. We'll now open public comment. Would the applicant like to comment? And if you could state your name, address, and relationship of the project.
Sure. My name is Doug Irvin. I'm the Director of Planning and Development for the Stonehenge Company at 147 North High Street in Gahanna.
Okay.
All right. First off, thank you. I'm very grateful to be here this evening. It's been about a year since we were here to talk about Elliott Park. We're back. As Mr. Blackford reported to you is absolutely correct. We did a couple tweaks to our plan. Otherwise, it's relatively unchanged. And I do want to be clear, there's constructed wetlands. It's probably a really terrible labeling on our part. They really were rain gardens that were part of our sustainable green infrastructure. And what we did is we kind of got an A on that test when we implemented that, because we were kind of guinea pigs for multifamily development. And after we ran all of our calculations, we found that we had reduced our storm discharge by over 48% of what was required. And we actually were required by the engineer to do a downstream analysis along Johnstown Road, and found that our as-built condition made that situation, we didn't contribute anything. Actually, we made it over 25% better. So we had our in-house management group and marketing group took a look, and I was missing something, pickleball. And so one of those, what you saw as a constructed wetland, was converted to a hard surface, and they're pickleball courts right behind our clubhouse. The other thing we had is we had a very large community building that had residential units in it. And when we originally had our final development plan approved. And we really, it's, even though we do have a housing issue in Central Ohio, it's still a very competitive market. And so in order to enhance our development, we went with a freestanding community building. And let me kind of show that here. You guys already know we're local. The other thing too, I just want to tell you, just to reaffirm again, everything we build multifamily-wise, we keep, so we don't sell it. So you can always come down to 147 North High Street and tell us what's on your mind. Theirs was our development program objectives. They talked about it. And here is that site plan that the planning staff had actually highlighted. I have some better pictures of that clubhouse. We'll go back. Here we go. All right. This is our new community building. A lot of glass. It's a steel structure that has some metal cladding. Unfortunately, the color printers and this presentation software doesn't really represent the colors as well, but what you see in that banding there, that is meant to resemble copper. So we wanted to make sure that the building had some natural elements to it to help it complement everything else that we had on site, since those all remain unchanged from the last time we were here. So with that freestanding building, it allows us just better security, privacy, deliveries. Uber and Amazon and every other delivery service has created complications in the property management business that we didn't have pre-COVID. They're there now, so we have to have refrigeration units inside for people that get perishable deliveries. We do a whole host of other things we didn't do 7 years ago. So we thought it prudent to get that freestanding building so we could manage those things a lot better. The units that were in that big building, we took and we also saw, we're getting a lot of demand at our other communities for people that are moving into this market because of all of the economic development that's happening around tech. And these are folks that will probably be in the community for anywhere from 1 to 3 years. And a lot of them don't want to rent houses. And so we're actually went back to the well and said a townhouse product would help break up the scale and the monotony. Before we had basically 11 buildings that looked a hell of a lot like each other. So when we frame that new community building with these townhomes, I think it gives us a better rhythm and it helps break up the front or the approach as you come in and makes it a bit more monumental. These are 3-story, 3-bedroom units with 2.5 baths. They're really, really nice units. These will rent for a lot of money. And there are not many of them. We only have 8. So, but we feel that's a really important piece for how we balance out our unit mix in the site. Since I had 12 and I have 8, I was missing 4. So early on when we were going through our planning, I had been trying to implement what I called a carriage house unit where we were building units above garages. It's not a new idea. We've only done it for about 150 years in the United States. We just kind of got away from it. Some of our competitors have ventured into that. Market on Main actually has some carriage house type units behind their primary buildings that you see when you're right at the roundabout in New Albany. But we took this as an opportunity, let me go back, to take one of our garage buildings that we had and figure out how we could get those 1-bedroom units on top of that. And we, at the same time, we tried to make this look, feel very practical, utilitarian, more like a true old storage dry goods type facility. Very sensitive to the height. So this too has a parapet with a pitched roof so that we don't, overwhelm our neighbors to the south. I did meet with a group from the Windward Trace condominium association yesterday and kind of went through this and just made sure that they were aware of this change and that we still have that increased buffer between us. So I don't feel that this change is overwhelming in any way. So really, that's how we break down the major or minor changes that we've done to tweak. As Director Blackford said, we're still at 251 units plus a model. Density is the same. The overall layout is exactly the same. It's just we, broke it into pieces in the front a little bit better. I think it makes the site very attractive from our marketing window on Morse Road. And I believe that these changes have given us a little bit of differentiation within our unit mix to also make it more marketable for us to prospective residents. And so with that, I will respect your time and be here to respond to any comments from the public or from the commission.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone from the public care to speak? I have one speaker slip, Mr. Goldsmith. Again, if you could come up and state your name and address.
Gary Goldsmith, 4651 East Johnstown Road. I'm the neighbor that's kitty corner to your development. And I don't really have any questions regarding the actual development. My concern is the removal of the wetlands areas. I appreciate the fact that there's a retention pond to catch water, but the removal of additional wetlands areas, that water is going to go somewhere, and most of the time it ends up in my backyard. And I have that problem with Winter Trace. There's no retention pond for that neighborhood. My backyard gets flooded in the spring rains, along with my neighbors that are further to the north. So I would object to the removal of the wetlands out of this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public? Okay, seeing none, care for a rebuttal?
Sure, I would love to speak to that. As I said, those constructed wetlands are not existing wetlands. There was an existing wetland that was delineated and credits were purchased in order for us to fill that. And what I would suggest is that we actually performed an analysis, our engineers did, at the request of the city engineer, as it relates to this off-site storm release. So I would encourage any of our neighbors to get their hands on that and take a look at it, because actually we are aware there is an existing condition. We're just not contributing to it after we're done with our development. And through our sustainable green infrastructure, though, one thing to keep in mind is our retention pond is smaller than it would have been otherwise. However, through all of the rain gardens, the use of pervious pavers, and a whole host of other measures, we're charging that water table more so that we're not discharging to people. We're trying to absorb as much that we can into the site so that we don't exacerbate problems that were just described. So, and I think we've detailed that out pretty well as best we can with modeling. We are aware that in the existing condition that is there today, there are issues that relate to stormwater on some of those parcels along Johnstown, but our report had shown that we actually make that situation better.
Okay. Thank you very much. So with that, we will close public comment and open up the questions from the commission. Mr. Chapaga?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Roth?
Yes.
What course of action does the public have if an excessive amount of water comes across a neighbor's property?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer to that. There's law going back hundreds of years about surface water rights, and I know there is a cause of action for if this developer would do something that would directly cause damage to a neighboring property. There is a cause of action for it, but that's all I know. It's not my field of expertise.
Mr. Blackford, is it all properties have to retain the water for a certain amount of time? I mean, the civil drawing should show that, correct?
The second half of your question, I can absolutely answer, confidently, yes. That is part of the engineering plan process, not so much the planning commission or planning's responsibility, so I'm a little less certain on what the standards are, but as Mr. Irvin said, generally speaking, you have to not exacerbate anything, you have to make it better after your development's there, or no worse than what it was, is my understanding. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Buffer. Other questions, Mr. Chair?
Thank you. Ms. Polly?
I have a question for the applicant. Was there a phase one done to determine why those wetlands needed to be removed or replaced, I guess?
Which wetlands were
Did you
you,
do a phase one?
which wetlands are you referring to?
The ones in green?
Those are not wetlands. Those were constructed rain gardens.
Okay.
We had a wetland delineation, and we worked with the Corps of Engineers and Ohio EPA, and acquired credits to be able to fill that wetland. That was a real wetland that was created by drainage from the adjoining properties. It was a man-made wetland, but it was still a wetland. What is on that site plan, those are not jurisdictional wetlands. Okay, so that, as I said, I'm going to take my engineers and smack them with a wet noodle, because that was a bad word to use.
I just have one other question. The area in red on that little footprint that you gave us in the packet, it says that units have been added to the garage buildings. What do you, units are like, are you talking about like townhouses with attached garages, or what?
No. What we did is, in that larger building that was originally approved, there were 12 residential units in that building. When we, added the townhomes, because it's a lower density product, we could only fit 8 in that space. So I was left with 4. So there's 4 one-bedroom units that are on the second floor of a garage building.
Garages. I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
thank
more
you.
like a traditional old carriage house,
I was
yes.
just trying to understand. Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Polly. Mr. Greenberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Blackford, just a quick question regarding the stormwater runoff and the ponds, which I've asked questions about all the time. Basically, if the engineering gives a thumbs up, that means that they've done the calculations and it's approved by them, it's good to go?
Correct. It's planning commission process. It's a little bit more high-level architecture related. The engineering details typically happen after planning commission. I think they've already went through all this because of the approvals from a year ago. But essentially, that's an exercise in math, and if the math works out, then it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down until the math works.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Irvin, I have a question. Last time we were here, the room was filled with lots of neighbors, and one of the things that was discussed was having a fence around the area in the back so that, headlights wouldn't shine into their property and they wouldn't be able to see directly in, and maybe only the third floor would be able to look out over their properties. Is that a part of this?
Yes, it is. And actually, the folks at Windward Trace picked the color and the type of fence, so to match their existing fencing there. And we talked about that again yesterday when I met with them. So that is still in play, and we are committed to doing that.
Were there any other issues that they brought up that you have addressed? Concerns?
No, it was, that meeting was more of just a level of familiarity, just a, hey, why are you going to be at the city? What's changed? And so we went through that, and it's the same dialogue that we're having here this evening.
How many, changing course a little bit, I'm a resident and need to bring my trash out. How many receptacles are on the property?
We did talk about that yesterday, and we use compactors. So there are 2 compactor facilities on this site. We do that for a couple reasons. First off, we don't want a lot of dumpsters with a lot of noise, and And they're also just, they take up space and they're unsightly. And so we build really, really nice enclosures, and we use compactors at all of our multifamily communities.
Where are those going to be located on the?
There's one at the east. If with the site plan, we're up there, here. You know, I'm controlling my own destiny here. Keep forgetting that I put that up there. Here we go. And along, just north of the retention pond on the east side of the site, there is a trash collection facility. And then along the western side of the site near the dog park is the other one. It's up more toward the front.
So the resident's going to have to walk out to the compactor and toss their bags in or whatever?
Yes, that's what they do.
Okay. I guess my last issue is the pickleball.
Yes.
I've been to other places where pickleball is a pretty loud sport.
Yes.
And then this actually was a complex in Florida where they actually outlawed it because the residents were complaining about the noise from the paddles hitting the balls. Big concern. How are you going to deal with that?
Well, at most, we only have 2 courts. And secondly, we own Little Turtle, the golf club at Little Turtle. So we converted, and we had to do an entire sound analysis. I had people playing pickleball just because we're selling condominiums near there, and we had to make sure that this wasn't going to be too loud. So there are ways you can dampen it with the type of paddles that are used. And then also and this is a fad right now, we're adding them. That could be a sand volleyball court in 3 years if people get tired of pickleball. Our biggest thing for right now, we're calling it pickleball, but it's just a recreational space near the clubhouse for our residents that we can transition. But with house rules, we definitely will set the hours, just like we do with our pools, so that people have quiet enjoyment.
I can tell you that in Gahanna at Hanna Park, you go over there on a Saturday morning and there's 40 or 50 people playing pickleball. It's quite popular.
Oh, it's very, very popular, but as I said, at most, we're going to have 2 courts. So, and we'll see.
Okay.
And we'll see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Earl.
Thank you. Mr. Siriano?
I think I answered my own question. I'm looking at the application, but the townhomes are predominantly white brick. Is that correct?
They're white brick, and there is some siding on the returns.
Got it. And then the Equitone panel, I'm looking at the Tectiva. That's a cementitious panel, isn't it?
No, it's actually like more of a metal panel.
Okay. And that has it comes pre-finished. Is that right?
That is correct. It does come pre-finished.
And then the shingles, I'm looking just specifically at the elevation. Are those asphalt shingles? Or are they?
That's a architecturally dimensioned 3-tab asphalt shingle from GAF.
Got it. Balconies are prefabricated?
I'm sorry?
Are balconies prefabricated, these metal balconies?
You mean the awnings?
I'm looking at the garage. Sorry, I'm just going through.
Those little French balconies?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we have the fabricator make those for us.
The Juliet. Okay. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siriano. Mr. Markin?
To follow up on Mr. Greenberg's comments, the pickleball courts, will they be lit?
No.
So your hours are going to be daylight hours.
You got it.
It will end when it gets dark.
Yep.
Earlier in the winter, later in the summer. I agree with Mr. I think pickleball is hot. I do think pickleball is here to stay. And it makes a lot of noise.
Named a sandwich after the city barbecue, so it must be real.
There you go. It's the extent of my comments.
I don't get it.
Thank you, Mr.
You're too
Markin.
young.
A couple questions. Mr. Blackford, just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, so with all these tweaks and changes, the density is still going to remain the same from previous submittals? Yep. So really, in the whole scheme of things, nothing is really changing again in terms of density?
Correct. Again, going back to 2022, it was 251 units, and I believe that was because that was the maximum allowed at that point in time with the density, so it stayed consistent with the rezoning development plan from last year and then the development plan from this year. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Then, Mr. Mayor, a couple questions. The detention pond, do you put safety benches in there? By
Sorry?
chance? Do you put safety benches when you design your ponds?
Safety benches as far as to keep people, restrict people in, or?
Well, it's sometimes common practice with those retention ponds is that you have a safety bench that's 2 or 3 feet below the surface, just so if, God forbid, somebody falls in, they're not going to drown.
Yo, I'm sorry. Yes. We shelf. I'm an old Welsh coal miner heritage. I call this shelf. We shelf that. So.
Okay. And then just, again, so I understand correctly, the redesign of the clubhouse is going to be kind of a one-stop shop for deliveries with Amazon and other deliveries. Did I get that correct?
High value and perishable items. I mean, non-perishables will still go to people's doors.
Okay.
But right now, what we're seeing a lot of with food deliveries, and especially the grocery stores are really pushing grocery delivery right now. So you can't leave that in the corridor, people. So we're having to make provisions for that, and also anything that's perishable. So yeah.
Okay. All right. That would answer my question. So, any other questions? Do I have a motion to approve case D-0001-2024?
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion to approve the development plan application DP-0001-2024.
We have a motion by Ms. Paulet. Do we have a second?
Second, Suriano.
Second by Mr. Suriano. Any discussion on the motion?
Not for me, thank you.
Mr. Greenberg? Yes. Suriano? Tamarkin?
Comments?
I have no comments. So with that, clerk, please call the roll.
Pollyea?
Yes.
Suriano?
Yes.
Greenberg?
Yes.
Mako?
Yes.
Shapaka?
Yes.
Tamarkin?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, next agenda item, unfinished business. I see there's none. New business, none. Official reports, Assistant City Attorney,
Nothing to report at this time.
Director of Planning.
Just want to say, I think our next meeting, June 26th, I think we have 2 items. One is a rezoning for property just to the east of the Valvoline on Hamilton Road. And then I think it's, a variance or variance and design review? Variance and design review, because we got to have variance on an agenda for One Church at our next. And I think there might be folks for both those items in attendance for that meeting, I'm anticipating. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Liaison?
Nothing tonight, sir.
Okay. Madam Mayor.
Hi, thank you. Good to see you this evening. The only thing I will mention is we have been working on the development of an active transportation plan, thanks to a grant that we had received from ODOT. You might recall there was a survey that went out to the community back in February. The consultants have been working with that information that was gathered, and now they have compiled a list of at least 60 different projects that could be done in this city to help improve mobility, multimodal transportation throughout the community. So in these chambers on June 25th, we will have an open house from 5 to 7 p.m. The consultants will be here asking the community to provide their feedback as they look through those projects, see if there's a project not on the list that they think should be on that list. So we invite the community, invite all of you to come on down, share your views and thoughts that evening. Again, it's Tuesday, June 25th, night before your Planning Commission meeting, in case you just love to be here and you want to come again, from 5 to 7. That's all I have. Thank you.
And who's the consultant?
Oh, you asked me too soon. Caitlin's, what's Caitlin's? I know Carpenter Marty is one of them. Burton Planning, yes. Burton Planning is one. And Burton Planning, Carpenter Marty, there's 3, and I can't think the third one, but I'm embarrassed to think that I can't think the third one. Burton is taking the lead on it.
Okay. I've, just for the record, I've worked with Burton before, and we're going to be in good hands.
It's
Kim
been really
does a good
enlightening.
job.
The steering committee had a meeting on Friday, and we had a list of projects, and it was amazing because of all the people in the room. We identified several projects, each group. They broke us into 4 groups, and we had to identify our top 5. And we all came up with at least 2 that were in each top 5. So One was on the west side, so it's good.
Very good.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question about
No.
transportation?
Yes,
I
Yes,
read-
Mr.
I read
Greenberg.
tonight that Hamilton Road Bridge over 270 is going to be
Yes.
taken down and rebuilt.
So ODOT is beginning a project, actually, they're rehabilitating 5 bridges along 270 between Hamilton Road all the way down toward the 70. The Hamilton Road Bridge is one of them. It's a $16 million approximate project. So Monday, they will start work. It's a year-long project expected to be on the Hamilton Road Bridge, rehabilitating that bridge. My understanding is the initial work will begin on the 270 ramps, so you won't see immediate bridge impacts, but eventually they'll get there as well. So they're going to start on the ramp work and then work their way up. But we're thrilled to, if you've been on that bridge and you've paid attention to that bridge, it cannot come any sooner.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I have really nothing to report other than thank you all for bearing with me through a long, variance-riddled meeting. Any correspondence and actions?
No, sir.
Poll members for comments. Mr. Shapaka? Ms. Pelley?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Greenberg?
No.
Mr. Shiano?
Nope.
Mr. Martin? But the only thing I have to comment, that vacation was wonderful a couple weeks ago, and health is getting there, so keep it going. Move for adjournment?
So moved.
Are they increasing the rates on the bridge?